Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I am Dr. Supradip Das from the Department of Design, IIT Guwahati. And this is the 10th lecture of this course, Introduction to Toy Design. In this lecture, we will explore how four influential thinkers, Freud, Piaget, Vygotsky, and Papert, understood play very differently. Though there are many play theorists, we will limit this lecture to these popular four only. Each theory highlights a different function of play. Together, they help see play not as just fun, but as a powerful space where children grow. By the end of this lecture, you will be able to see how these perspectives can shape how toys are designed and how children can be supported. These theories can help us ask better design questions like, what emotional work does this toy do? What thinking does it support? Who is involved in the play? Is it the child alone or others too? The aim is not to turn you into psychoanalysts, but to help you understand that play serves as a space where emotions can be reached, released, and recognized. Before we look at Freud's play theory, it is helpful to understand who he was. Sigmund Freud was an Austrian neurologist and the founder of psychoanalysis, which is a method for understanding the unconscious mind. Freud contributed several foundational ideas that shaped modern psychology. He argued that much of human behavior comes from the unconscious, that much of that what we feel and think operates outside of our immediate awareness because of feelings and fears we may not be aware of. He proposed that behavior is shaped not only by what we consciously think, but also by desires, fears, and conflicts that operate under the surface. He studied symbolism in dreams, fantasies, drawings, and children's play, proposing that these symbolic acts reveal inner emotional life. Freud was one of the first people in Western psychology to take the emotional lives of children seriously. Freud was not studying toys or classrooms. He was studying the unconscious mind. For Freud's children, like adults, experience emotional conflicts that they may not fully understand or be able to express directly. These conflicts are often repressed, not because children choose to hide them, but because they don't yet have the language or emotional tools to articulate them. Freud believed that these hidden feelings were communicated indirectly, often emerging through symbolism, in dreams, fantasies, and importantly, in play. In observing children, he noticed that something important: play was not random. When children play, they don't always show us what they are thinking in a literal way. Instead, they use narratives, symbols, gestures, pretend characters, repetition, and imagination to communicate indirectly. For the first time, childhood behavior, including play, was seen as deeply emotional, meaningful, symbolic, and often connected to anxiety, desire, and loss. A central claim in Freud's work was that childhood experiences shape letter personality. This made play especially important because it offered a window into how children were processing their early experiences. Even though many of Freud's ideas are debated today, these contributions opened the door for psychologists to take children's emotional worlds seriously. A central claim in Freud's work was the childhood experiences shape later personality. This made play especially important because it offered a window into how children were processing their early experiences. However, Freud did not write a step-by-step theory of toys or play the way later psychologists did. In his 1908 article, Creative Writers and Daydreaming, Freud stated that children's play corresponds to adult fantasies, suggesting that play is a way to access the child's unconscious. Freud later described play as a way to work through anxiety and traumatic experiences. He observed his grandson Ernest's play with a cotton reel, fought and the game, to cope with his mother's absence, demonstrating that children don't just play for pleasure, but repeat certain games to process painful events. So Freud himself did not formalize a play theory in a dedicated work. Most of what is attributed to him about play comes from small references scattered across essays, clinical observation, and later psychoanalytic literature and play therapy tradition, for example, from his daughter Anna Freud and Melanie Klein, an Austrian British author and psychoanalyst. However, it is still clear that in Freud's view, play is not just entertainment. The next few slides each focus on one important Freudian concept each. Together, they help us understand how play can function as a space where children express feelings, work through difficult experiences, and communicate things they cannot yet say out loud. Freud did not see play as just entertainment or learning. He saw it as a deeply emotional activity, one where children work through feelings they cannot yet put into words. In that sense, Freud's theory suggests that play functions as a form of emotional self-therapy, not therapy guided by an adult, but a self-directed process where the child uses imagination, repetition, and symbolism to manage inner conflicts. The 5 ideas we will discuss next are not separate explanations. They are different ways in which this emotional self-therapy happens through play. Freud proposed that the mind uses defense mechanism to protect itself from anxiety. Children experience fear, anger, jealousy, and loss, but they don't yet have the language to explain these emotions. Play becomes a defensive space. Instead of confronting a feeling directly, the child displays it into play. For example, a child afraid of doctors may turn a doll into the patient and becomes the doctor themselves. The anxiety does not disappear, but it becomes manageable. Through play, the child creates emotional distance while still engaging with the feeling. Freud also believed that play, like dreams, allows wish fulfillment. Children often want things they cannot have, such as power, independence, control, or attention. In play, these wishes can be safely acted out. A child who feels angry or frustrated, perhaps because they were scolded by a parent or ignored by an adult, may not be able to express that anger directly. Instead, during the play, the child may play house where they are the authority figure, pretending to scold doll representing a child, or create a bad guy character who gets punished. Here, the child is displacing their anger into toys and characters. The emotion is real, but the target is safer. This fulfillment is not trivial. It helps release emotional tension and supports psychological balance. Here, the play acts as a defense mechanism by allowing the child to redirect strong emotions towards symbolic objects. The feeling is expressed, but in a way that feels safe and acceptable. Freud observes that children often repeat play themes, even when they involve fear or discomfort. He called this repetition compulsion. A child might repeatedly play out a hospital scene, a loss, or a conflict. This repetition is not accidental, and it's not always fun. Through repetition, the child is trying to understand, contain, and eventually reduce the emotional impact of the experience. In play, repetition is not stagnation, it is processing. This repetition compulsion is often seen for situations that may incite anxiety. One of Freud's most important insights was that children use play to gain mastery over anxiety. When something frightening happens, the child often experiences it passively, with no control. Freud famously observed that children replay stressful moments not to relieve them but to master them. In play, that same experience can be repeated, reshaped, and controlled. For example, a child who experiences separation may repeatedly play games of disappearance and return. If a doctor's visit was scary, children will perform injections on dolls. Each repetition reduces fear and increases emotional control. Repetition creates predictability, and predictability reduces fear. Play allows the child to move from being overwhelmed to being in change. And lastly, as mentioned before, Freud believed that the unconscious speaks in symbols. Children rarely express emotions directly. Instead, they use objects, characters, and action as substitutes for real feelings and relationships. A toy may represent a parent, a fear, or a desire. A game scenario may represent a conflict the child cannot yet name. Play becomes a symbolic language, one that allows emotional expression without direct confrontation. As designers, Freud teaches us to observe not the toy, but the theme. When children repeatedly attack, hide, save, rescue, or reverse roles, they are communicating something emotionally meaningful. A well-designed toy gives space for some expression. Freud reminds us that children need emotional outlets. Designers can support this by offering toys that allow safe aggression, offer comfort, invite expression, or help transform fear into mastery. A doll or a puppet, for example, lets a child give fear a voice and then control it. Freud's theory, however, is not perfect. Not every play act has a hidden meaning. Not every repetition is emotional. Many aspects are culturally biased. But for designers, Freud gives us valuable insight into how play supports emotional life. It's emotional release, symbolic expression, and a way for children to make sense of and feel more in control of their inner world. While Freud's theory gives us deep insights into the emotional meaning of play, it also has important limitations. One major limitation is its overemphasis on unconscious conflict. Freud often interprets play as an expression of hidden fears or desires, even when children might simply be exploring, experimenting, or having fun. This leads to another criticism. Freud can sometimes overinterpret simple play. Not every instances of play reflects trauma or anxiety. Sometimes play is just play. Freud's framework is also heavily focused on emotions like fear, loss, and desire, which can overshadow other equally important aspects of play, such as curiosity, joy, and social connections. Another key limitation is that Freud's theory is not culturally universal. His ideas emerged from a specific historical and cultural context, and they may not apply in the same way across different societies and child rearing practices. That said, Freud's work remains foundational, especially when we think about toys and play from an emotional design perspective. Even today, his ideas help us understand how play can support emotional safety and expression. Freud's theory focuses primarily on emotional processing, which means there are many aspects to play that is simply does not explain well. For example, Freud does not explain cognitive growth. That is how children develop logical thinking, problem solving skills, or understanding of rules through play. He also does not address social collaboration. How children learn to cooperate, negotiate, or play together is largely absent from his framework. Freud's theory does not account for stages of symbolic development, how play evolves as children grow and their thinking becomes more complex. The role of environment is also missing. Freud paid little attention to how cultural tools, languages, or social setting shape play. Finally, Freud does not explain learning through interaction, how children learn with and from others during play. These gaps are important because they remind us that no single theory can explain all dimensions of play. Despite its limitations, Freud's contribution to our understanding of play is profound. Freud helped us to see that play expresses emotions, often indirectly and symbolically. He showed us that play allows children to process fear, anxiety, and inner conflicts in ways that feel safe. Through repetition and imagination, play becomes a space where children rehearse mastery, turning overwhelming experiences into manageable ones. In this way, play transforms experience. It does not erase difficulty, but it reshapes it. From a design perspective, this leads to a powerful idea. Toys can function as emotional tools. They are not just objects or entertainment or learning. They can support comfort, control, and emotional regulation. This insight continues to influence play therapy, early childhood education, and emotional sensitive toy design today. Let's now shift from theory to design. If we take Freud seriously, Toys are not just learning tools, they are emotional tools. This means that good toy design must create safe spaces for emotional expression. Toys should allow children to project feelings without fear of being right or wrong. Freud's ideas also highlight the importance of symbolic flexibility. The more open a toy is to interpretation, the more easily a child can use it to express inner states. Repetition, which Freud saw as emotionally meaningful, tells designers something important. A toy should allow repeated actions without punishing the child for doing the same thing again and again. Finally, Freud reminds us that play is about control and agency. Designing toys that let children make decisions, reverse roles, or control outcomes supports emotional mastery. So, when we design toys, we are not just shaping behavior, we are shaping how children feel, cope, and make sense of their world. Now that we have seen how Freud helps us understand emotion in play, let us move to Piaget, who asks a different question. What does play tell us about how children think? Jean Piaget was a Swiss developmental psychologist who fundamentally changed how we understand children's thinking. Rather than seeing children as passive learners, Piaget described them as active constructors of knowledge. He was interested in how children reason, how their thinking changes with ages, and how they make sense of the world. For Piaget, play was closely tied to cognition. It reflected how children understood reality at different stages of development. Piaget's most important contribution was the idea that children actively construct knowledge through interaction with their environment. He introduced the concept of schemas, which are mental structures that help children organize and interpret experiences. As children grow, these schemas become more complex and their play changes accordingly. Piaget also proposed that cognitive development happens in stages, each of its own way of thinking. Play, for Piaget, reflects these stages rather than driving them. Unlike Freud, Piaget did not see play as emotional release. And unlike Vygotsky, he did not emphasize social interaction. Piaget believed that play is mainly a process of assimilation, where children fit new experiences into what they already know. In this view, play does not usually create new knowledge. Instead, it helps children practice, reinforce, and stabilize existing mental structures. Piaget's theory emphasizes that children actively construct knowledge through assimilation and accommodation. In The Origins of Intelligence in Children, Piaget in 1952 describes play as a process dominated by assimilation, allowing children to practice and consolidate cognitive skills. Play evolves through stages reflecting cognitive maturation. In the sensory motor stage, that is the first 2 years of their life, infants engage in functional play, repeating actions for sensory pleasure, refining sensory motor skills. For examples, a baby shakes a rattle to hear its sound, practicing coordination. In the pre-operational stage, children begin symbolic play, using objects, actions, or roles to represent something else. In the concrete operational stage, children aged from 7 to 11 years engage in structured play with agreed upon rules requiring logical thinking and social coordination. Piaget observes games with rules reflect the child's ability to subordinate individual desires to collective norms. In the formal operational stage, abstract hypothetical thinking develops. Counterfactual reasoning and strategic planning emerge, and cognitive transfer, that is, application of ideas across contexts, is possible. This makes solving puzzles, debating ethics, STEM projects possible. For Piaget, these changes in play mirror changes in thinking. While Piaget's theory is influential, it has several limitations. He tends to underestimate the role of social interaction in learning and play. Research shows that children can perform at higher levels when supported by others. His stages can also appear too rigid. Many children show abilities earlier or in more flexible ways than Piaget predicted. Finally, Piaget pays little attention to emotion, culture, or context, all of which strongly shape play. Piaget's framework struggles to explain why children use play to express emotions, seek comfort, or cope with stress. It also does not explain how children learn through collaboration, negotiation, or adult guidance. Cultural differences in play practices are largely absent from this theory, as is the idea that learning can be socially mediated. These gaps become important when we move toward sociocultural theories of play. Despite its limitations, Piaget's contribution is crucial. He helped us understand that play reveals how children think. By observing play, we can see a child's current level of reasoning and understanding. Piaget positioned play as a mirror of cognitive development, one that evolves as children grow. From a design perspective, Piaget reminds us that toys must match the child's cognitive abilities. A toy that is too complex frustrates. One that is too simple bores. Good design supports exploration, repetition, and gradual complexity. Designing with Piaget means respecting how children think and how that thinking change over time. So far, we have looked at play through two lenses. Freud helped us understand the emotional world of the child. Piaget helped us understand the cognitive world, that is how children think and make sense of things. But both largely focus on the child as an individual. Vygotsky shifts the focus outward. He asks, what role do culture, language, tools, and other people play in learning and play? With Vygotsky, play becomes not just something children do alone. It becomes something what happens between people. Vygotsky was a Russian psychologist whose work transformed how we think about learning. Unlike Piaget, Vygotsky believed that development does not happen first, followed by learning. Instead, he argued that learning leads development. For Vygotsky, children grow cognitively through interaction with adults, peers, language, and cultural tools. Vygotsky's key contribution was showing that learning is not a solitary process. Children do not develop in isolation. They learn through interaction, through conversation, shared activities, imitation, and guidance. Language, in particular, plays a central role. It is not just a way to communicate, it is a tool for thinking. Through culture and social interaction, children internalize ways of reasoning. Take an example of child playing shop with an adult. Through role playing and social interaction, they learn counting money, exchanging goods, polite language like please and thank you, and social roles such as buyer or seller. These are culturally specific ways of reasoning learned through interaction and play. According to Vygotsky, play was not a break from learning. It was powerful context for learning. In play, children often act beyond their everyday abilities. They follow rules, take on roles, and regulate their behavior in ways they may not yet manage in real life. Even imaginative play has structure. When a child pretends, they are still following shared meanings and social rules. Play, in this sense, helps children practice self-control and social understanding. Thinking of children playing school, one child becomes the teacher, other become students. Even though this is pretend play, it is not random. The children follow rules like raising hands, waiting their turn, and listening. The child playing the teacher is doing things they do not usually do in real life, such as giving instructions, explaining, managing others. They are acting beyond their everyday abilities. Although the play is imaginative, it still has structure. Everyone understands what a teacher does and how students behave. Those meanings come from culture. Through this kind of play, children practice self-control, role-taking, and social understanding. This is why Vygotsky said play is not break from learning. In fact, it is powerful space where learning actually happens. One of Vygotsky's most influential idea is the zone of proximal development, or ZPD. The ZPD describes the space between what a child can do independently and what they can do with the help. Play often operates inside this zone. Through guidance, imitation, or collaboration, children perform at higher levels than they could alone. The term scaffolding was introduced later, but it describes this idea well. Temporary support that helps the child grow and is gradually removed. A young child is learning to place shapes into a shape sorter. At first, the child struggles to match the shapes at the correct holes. The toy itself provides scaffolding. The openings are clear-shaped. The pieces fit only one way. The colors and outlines guide placement. With these supports, the child succeeds in completing the task. Over time, the child no longer needs to rely on color cues or trial and error. They recognize shapes mentally and place them correctly. As the child's understanding grows, the need for support reduces. This is scaffolding built into the toy. Temporary guidance that leads to independent skill. Like all theories, Vygotsky's has limitations. He places less emphasis on individual exploration and spontaneous discovery. Emotional processes are not central to his framework. Unlike Piaget, Vygotsky did not outline clear developmental stages, which can make his theory harder to apply systematically. Some of his ideas are also difficult to test empirically. Vygotsky's theory does not fully explain play that is deeply personal or emotionally driven. It also struggles to account for solitary, unstructured play where no social guidance is present. This reminds us that social interaction is important, but not the whole story. Vygotsky's lasting contribution is showing us that play is deeply social. Through play, children learn how to follow rules, take perspectives, and use cultural tools. Play becomes a bridge between the child and the world they are growing into. Although Vygotsky did not study toy directly, but he showed us that play is socially mediated. Designers can use Vygotsky's theory to think about how toys mediate interaction as social tools. Good toy design can invite collaboration, conversation, and shared problem solving. Designing with Vygotsky in mind means thinking about how a toy supports interaction of different nature between children, between adults and children, and within the cultural contexts. If we apply his ideas into a game like Ludo, we can see this clearly. Ludo requires more than individual thinking. Children must interact, they wait for turns, follow shared rules, and respond to others' actions. At first, adults or older children guide the play. It's not your turn yet, or you need a six to start, or mediate by saying that's part of the game. Through these interactions, children begin to understand rules, fairness, and self-control. Over time, the guidance fades. The child follows the rules independently and even corrects others. From a Vygotskian perspective, the learning happens first between people and only later within the child. When designers think this way, they stop designing only objects and start designing conditions for interaction. The last and the most contemporary thinker I would like to introduce is Seymour Papert. He was a mathematician, computer scientist, and educational thinker at MIT, and one of the most influential figures in learning sciences and educational technology. He worked closely with Jean Piaget, so his ideas grow directly out of cognitive development theory, but take it in a very different, more applied direction. Papert was not primarily studying play for its own sake. He was deeply interested in how children learn, especially how they learn complex ideas like mathematics, logic, and system thinking. He believed that traditional instruction-based education limited children's natural ways of learning. His most famous book, Mindstorms, proposed that computers could become powerful learning materials, not for delivering content, but for helping children think by making things. For toy designers, Papert is important because he changed how we think about learning toys, not as teaching devices, but as thinking tools. Papert did not separate play and learning in the way schools traditionally do. For him, playful activity, especially making, building, and programming, was one of the most powerful forms of intellectual work. He showed that children could engage with every sophisticated ideas such as the geometry, logic, and systems when these were embedded in playful construction activities. Mistakes were not failures but productive moments for thinking. Debugging a program or rebuilding a model was where deep learning occurred. Importantly, Papert viewed children not as users of knowledge, but as designers of ideas. From a toy design perspective, these reframes toys as environments for thinking rather than as instructional tools. Papert introduced the theory called constructionism, which is often summarized as learning by making or learning by doing. But the idea is much deeper than that slogan. Constructionism builds on constructivism, the idea that learners actively build knowledge, but adds a crucial element, that is, learning happens especially well when people are constructing something external and shareable. The key idea is that thinking becomes more powerful when it is anchored in making something visible, manipulable, and revisable. For Papert, the object being built is not the goal. The object is a medium for thinking. From a designer's perspective, this shifts the attention from what the toy teaches to what the child is able to think with while playing. Papert emphasized several core principles that define constructionist learning. First, children learn best when they are actively constructing artifacts, not just manipulating prefabricated toys, but building, modifying, and designing. Second, tinkering is central. Trial, error, failure, and adjustment are not problems. They are the learning process itself. Third, personal meaning matters. When children care about what they are building, learning becomes emotionally engaging and long-lasting. Fourth, iteration is essential. Papert famously spoke about debugging, that is, learning by finding mistakes, fixing them, and improving one's design. Finally, the visibility of outcomes matters. When ideas become physical or visible, children can reflect on them, discuss them, and refine them. For designers, this tells us that good learning toys should invite construction, experimentation, revision, and reflection. Papert's ideas had a profound impact on how educational toys and learning tools began to be designed. Instead of fixed function toys with predefined outcomes, constructionist toys emphasize open-ended systems, parts that can be combined in many ways. These toys support iteration. Children build, test, fail, modify, and rebuild. They do not present problems with one correct answers, but invite children to frame their own problems and solutions. Importantly, these toys are not meant to instruct directly. They are meant to act as thinking media, materials through which children explore ideas. The most famous direct outcomes of Papert work is the logo programming language, where children controlled a small turtle to draw shapes, learning geometry through programming and play. Later, this philosophy strongly influenced Lego technique and especially Lego Mindstorms, which explicitly combined construction, programming, and experimentation. Modern robotic kits, coding toys, and maker platforms are descend from the lineage. What unites these products is not technology but philosophy. They treat toys as laboratories for thinking. They allow children to build systems, test ideas, and learn through design rather than instruction. Peppert's legacy is visible today in nearly every serious STEM construction toy on the market. These theories do not compete with each other. Each one looks at play from different angle, and together they give us a much richer understanding. Freud helps us notice moments where play carries emotional meaning. We begin to see repetition, symbolic roles, and emotional expression not as random but as ways children process feelings. Piaget helps us observe how play reflects child's current way of thinking. We notice whether a child is reasoning correctly, experimenting physically, or beginning to think symbolically and logically. Vygotsky helps us understand how play is shaped by interaction, language, and culture. We start paying attention to how peers, adults, rules, and shared meanings influence what children can do in play. Peppert adds a crucial fourth lens, learning through making. He shows us how children think by building, constructing, testing, and debugging ideas in the world. Play here becomes not just expression or interaction, but a medium for designing, inventing, and understanding systems. None of these theories were written to explain toys. They were written to explain play. As designers, we interpret these theories to think more carefully about what toys afford. But remember, theories of play don't explain toys directly. They explain play. As designers, we interpret these theories to think about toys. For example, when designing STEM construction toy, theory may be applied to check design decisions. Looking through Freud's lens, think about emotional experience. STEM kits can be frustrating. So ask, does the toy feel safe to fail with? Are parts durable? Can the child repeat, undo, and try again without penalty? Here, the design supports confidence and persistence. Looking through Piaget's lens, think about cognitive readiness. Are the concepts concrete enough to be understood through action? Does the toy move from simple mechanism to more complex ones? Can the child clearly see cause and effect? This helps align the challenge with how children reason at that age. Looking through Vygotsky's lens, think about interaction. These toys are rarely used alone. Parents, siblings, or peers are often involved. Design instructions that invite conversation, model that allow more than one person to participate, and challenges that encourage discussion rather than just following steps. Now, looking through Peppert's lens, we think about learning through construction. Does the toy allow children to build their own models rather than only follow fixed instructions? Can they modify designs, experiment with variations, and debug failures? Are ideas visible through mechanism, structures, or programs? Here, the toy becomes a thinking tool, not just a teaching device. The toy itself has not changed. What changes is what we pay attention to as a designer. A good STEM toy design balances emotional safety, cognitive clarity, social interaction, and learning through making. Remember, these theories does not give us answers. They sharpen our questions. And better questions lead to better design. See you in the next lecture. Till then, embrace playful moments.